look, we're on part 6. I'm not exactly sure what else to say during the intro at this point, but I'm sure you're all here for one reason and one reason only. You like my posters. But to ensure that I cover all my bases, we're gonna talk about some underappreciated horror. That's right, it's time for the top 5 scariest horror movies nobody talks about, part 6. Let's get to it. Coming in at number 5, we've got Summer of '84. This movie is dark. Like, dark. And the craziest part is that it makes you believe that it isn't for most of the runtime. It's the classic tale of some young gaffers with overly active imaginations trying to dig up some dirt on one of their neighbors. And of course they find out in the end that their suspicions were misplaced and have a big pizza party to apologize, right? Wrong. I don't want to spoil too much here, but holy smokes is the reveal in this movie nuts. Actually, it's beyond nuts, because after revealing the horror that was so well hidden for most of the runtime, they take it even further. Pulling the mask off the Scooby-Doo villain will not stop them this time. Mask off means this person has nothing left to lose and therefore will go even harder as a murderous villain. It is terrifying. And for a movie that plays with your expectations so expertly, it gets less praise than I think it should. Like, the reason I saw it in the first place was because I saw it on the shelf at the video store near my house and it had a cool cover. I hadn't read anything about it, hadn't heard anyone singing its praises, so if you're hearing about this movie for the first time, this is your sign to go and see it. I just think about all the parallels they draw between the opening and closing scenes and how depressing that shot is in context. Absolutely wild. It takes all the tropes you would expect from a fun, uplifting coming-of-age movie and twists the knife right in the belly. Right down to the annoyingly likable cast of idiot youth pulled right from the Goonies, except this time, the stakes are appallingly real. I'd like to say more, but like I already mentioned, I feel like I spoiled too much already, so grab a bag of M&Ms, maybe a can of Tab, and revel in the 80s nostalgia before they sweep your legs out from under you and make you feel ill. Isn't that why we all watch horror in the first place? At number 4, we've got Witchboard. There is a quality to this movie that I just can't pin down, but it is just extremely watchable. One might think that a cheesy 80s demon summoning movie about a Ouija board wouldn't be captivating, but Witchboard proves that hypothesis wrong. After a house party turns sour, a particularly pretentious guest whips out the Ouija board and proves that he's got a connection with a little boy on the other side. Following an argument with an extremely drunk rival, he leaves in a huff, forgetting to bring the board with him, which inspires the rival's girlfriend to use the board herself, accidentally summoning a much more malevolent presence. A bit contrived, sure, but the 80s was a different time. It manages to pack a bunch of over-the-top set-piece kills into its runtime though, and ends up being a whole lot of fun. The scene down by the lake is an all-timer, and I don't know if I'll ever be able to get over the penultimate scene with the showdown with the evil spirit. Usually guns don't do much against the paranormal, but hey, you never know. Coming in at number 3, we've got Cabin by the Lake. Movies about making movies? What could be better? Well, what about a horror movie about a horror writer who does all of his research himself? You got it, he kills real people using insane methods in order to see how they react, and then uses that information while writing his scripts. Holy smokes. Very meta, very goofy, and a whole lot of fun. This is exactly the kind of movie that needs to be made for TV, which it was. Never too serious, featuring an idea that might not be quite strong enough for a theatrical feature, but with enough going for it to keep audiences engaged. This kind of low budget, like low risk movie just is so much fun when people make it right. Plus, having a garden of dead bodies at the bottom of a lake is a pretty fun idea, especially when he goes back to check on them every once in a while. I don't know, this movie probably shouldn't be considered all that good, but it's freaky enough to have a relatively lasting effect, plus it is the perfect window into the early 2000s. If you ever wanted to remember all of the insane fashion choices of folks back then, this is the way to see it. It's definitely made in the wake of Scream, which honestly is a fascinating era to investigate if you're interested in horror history. The postmodern, self-aware horror comedies that got churned out after Wes Craven's massive success are just so gosh darn interesting, even if they're ripping off a largely better movie. Don't go in expecting a masterpiece and you'll have a blast with this one. Coming in at number 2, we've got Whack It. Remember kids, summoning demons is serious business. You can't take that back once it's done, so think nice and hard before making a deal with the devil. And if you don't take me too seriously, then go watch Whack It and see exactly why that kind of extra precaution is worthwhile. In this Canadian creep fest, we meet Leah, a high schooler obsessed with the paranormal. I'm sure many can relate. However, Leah takes it a little too far. Instead of becoming a big horror movie nerd or spending her nights reading creepypasta, she decides she's gonna actually summon a demon because she's mad at her mom. We've all been there, right? Usually you go and scream into a pillow or sneak out and hang out with the kids she warned you away from. This whole summoning a deadly demon thing seems like a little much, but that's what Leah does, and wouldn't you know it, she and her mother soon reconcile after, leaving Leah a little bit conflicted about her ritual. So now she's got to live her life constantly afraid of when a crazy demon is going to show up, and this plays out very well throughout the movie as plenty of unexpected stuff happens. Leah wakes up in places she doesn't recognize, her friends start acting weird. She gets warned that the demon she summoned is able to shapeshift, meaning that she can't trust anyone. It leans into the creepiness of the situation more than anything else, making for a wonderfully atmospheric horror experience. As Leah tries to get rid of the demon through a few different methods, things get worse, and that feeling of unplaceable dread rises further and further. All set to some lovely metal tunes, too. So if you like your horror tense and creepy, Pyewacket is right up your alley. Oh, and Andrea from The Walking Dead is in it. But of course, it's from Canada, so folks are less inclined to talk about it. Story of my life, right? Finally, at number 1, we've got Spring. Here's something you don't hear about too often, a romantic horror movie. Horror comedy is super successful, so you gotta wonder why other famous genres don't get included as often. There have been a few decent horror westerns that make it pretty big, but horror romance seems to occupy a much less public space. Let me know if you know of any other horror romances in the comments. I want to know about more. Back to the movie though, this is a sneaky little number. After a string of bad luck and tragedy, young lad Evan travels to Italy to clear his mind. He meets a young woman named Louise and takes a job on a nearby farm in order to stick around and try his luck with her. Probably a bad call though, especially when on vacation to relax, but hey. It ends up working out for him and Louise ends up sleeping with him, but something's wrong. And now Evan sees horrifying monsters wherever he goes, so what the hell's going on? Well, you might have guessed it, Louise is actually an immortal mutant monster. She's been alive for centuries and has to look for mates in order to stay alive. Now, in a lot of horror movies, this would become a fight for Evan's life as she tries to kill and silence him or maybe consume him like a Black Widow, but that is not the case in Spring. Love is part of the equation and Evan wants to know if they have a deeper connection, so he sticks around even longer, equal parts fascinated and freaked out by Louise's monstrous transformations and tendency to murder random things. Firing on all cylinders, Spring gives us body humor, coming of age, romance, Lovecraft, and more. It is a truly wild mix of genres, and there aren't many movies that can claim to tick as many boxes. Give it a whirl. Who says horror movies have to be well known? Well, actually, you know what? That's kind of what they're known for, is not being always well known. But folks would be more consistently scared if they dug a little deeper before landing on something to watch. So what'd you think of the list? Any of these seem extra spooky? Have you seen any? What's a horror movie you wish got more love? Make sure you let me know down in the comments. Speaking of comments, let's take a look at some of your more comical ones from the top 5 Shudder horror movies worth watching. Beezer says, Shudder is one of my favorite streaming services. You and me both. There is nothing quite like it. Larry Johnson says, In Huos. Okay, upon further investigation, you're Canadian. Geez, Larry, what gave it away? Was it my going oot and a boot in my canoe, or did my everlasting love of hockey seal the deal? Justin Compton says, so are we going to discuss the Nick Cage Five Nights at Freddy's movie? Oh, all in due time, my friend. All in due time. Stinkabell says, anything for Jackson slaps. And it is directed by the guy who's done like 1 million Christmas rom-coms based on Harlequin novels. Epsilon Zero says, fun fact, Host is just as long as a Zoom call time limit and hot damn does it ever make use of that time. P.S. Anyone interested in SCPs, for the love of all things holy / blasphemic / superficial, play Control. Going back to the Zoom call bit, all of the credits are in the form of Zoom icons, etc. So it's just a really fun movie overall. And that's all the time we have for today. I'm gonna go brew some coffee with Red Bull instead of water and then head down to the local library. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Who says horror movies have to be well known? Well, excuse me. But folks who would be more consistently scared if they nope. That's my Canadian accent. I don't know if that that works. Sorry, I've got some weird going on in my mouth. And all the credits are in the form of Zoom icons too, so that's a pretty fun movie. I feel like I didn't sell that one. Hold on.